Imagine walking home one night thinking the streets are safe, until three teenage boys corner you, mocking, threatening, and leaving you terrified. This is the reality Aaliyah faced, a 20-year-old black woman, alone, scared, and on the brink of despair. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a stranger appeared. Someone who would change everything. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about fear. It's about courage, love, and standing up against hate in the darkest moments. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. Aaliyah, only 20, walked briskly down the empty street, her heart pounding, not just from the late hour, but from the danger lurking in the shadows. Three teenage boys, Tyler, Cody, and Blake, emerged like predators, laughing cruelly, circling her with a menace that made her stomach drop. She tried to stay calm, tried to walk faster, but every step felt heavier, every breath tighter. Her bag was clutched to her chest, and her mind raced for escape, but the alleyways offered no refuge. The boys were closing in, their taunts sharp and relentless. "Where do you think you're going, pretty girl?" Tyler sneered. Fear shot through her, raw and undeniable. In that moment, it felt like the world had turned against her, and there was no one to save her. Then, just when she thought the night would swallow her whole, a figure appeared from the shadows. Tall, steady, with eyes that didn't waver, Lucas stepped in. Calm, confident, and unafraid, he faced the boys as if the night itself had given him courage. The tension exploded, words, shoves, a heartbeat away from chaos. But Aaliyah felt something shift. Hope. Who was this stranger? And why did his presence feel like a lifeline in the middle of terror? Tonight, everything changes for Aaliyah. And what begins as a terrifying encounter on a deserted street might just become the most unexpected story of love and courage you'll ever hear. But here's the question. Could this sudden, impossible rescue really be the start of something more? Or is danger far from over? Aaliyah had always walked with quiet confidence. At 20, she was bright, ambitious, and full of life, navigating her days with the kind of energy that made people notice, but not in a way that demanded attention. She loved the little things, the smell of freshly brewed coffee on her morning walk, the rhythm of city streets as she headed to her job at the small local bookstore, the comforting weight of her headphones playing her favorite music as she escaped into her own world. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She had friends who cared for her, a family that cheered her on, and a routine that felt safe. Every evening she would stroll home down the streets she knew like the back of her hand, greeting neighbors and feeling the quiet pulse of her community. Lucas, her co-worker and sometimes confidant, often joked that Aaliyah could brighten the grayest day with just a smile. But even in this ordinary rhythm, the edges of the world were sharper than they seemed. Whispers in the park when she walked by alone, sideways glances from strangers on crowded streets, subtle dismissals from people who assumed her presence was less than theirs. These things had always been there. Faint but persistent, like a shadow she could never quite shake. She told herself it was nothing, just the residue of ignorance in a world that didn't always see her as she saw herself. And yet, something felt different tonight. There was a tension in the air she couldn't place, a quiet unease that made her heart skip a beat. The streets that usually felt like home seemed narrower, the dark alleys more menacing. The city hummed with life, but under that hum, she could sense the murmurs of judgment, the invisible lines drawn before she even stepped into a space. Aaliyah had no idea that what felt like a fleeting discomfort was only the calm before a storm. The simple walk home she had taken 1,000 times was about to become the first step into a night she would never forget. A night that would test her courage, challenge the world's prejudices, and introduce someone who would change everything. Because sometimes, the world shows its harshest face when you least expect it, and Aaliyah was about to see just how sharp that edge could be. Aaliyah's evening walk started like any other, her headphones on, her bag swinging lightly against her side, the familiar city lights flickering against the pavement. But tonight something felt off. The air seemed heavier, charged, like the world was holding its breath. Three figures appeared ahead, teenage boys, faces twisted with mischief and cruelty. Tyler, Cody, and Blake, no older than 16, stepped into her path with the kind of confidence only ignorance and arrogance could breed. At first, their words were subtle, comments muttered under their breath, but when Tyler shouted, loud enough for Aaliyah to hear, everything changed. "Hey, where do you think you're going, pretty girl?" "Alone?" His voice carried a challenge, sharp and mocking. Cody and Blake laughed, circling her, closing the distance, their shadows stretching across the sidewalk. Aaliyah's heart raced. She quickened her pace, trying to appear unbothered, but every step made her more aware of their presence. The city lights seemed dimmer, the distant hum of traffic muffled by the pounding of her pulse. "Leave me alone," she said firmly, but her voice wavered despite herself. The boys weren't done. They shoved her bag, sneering at her as if her fear was a game. Tyler laughed, mocking her stumble. "What's the matter, scared?" Each word sliced through the fragile calm she had maintained all her life. Passers-by glanced briefly, then looked away, pretending not to see, leaving Aaliyah exposed and alone. The city that had always felt like home suddenly felt like a cage. She tried to step onto the curb, to escape, but Cody blocked her path. Blake leaned close, his breath hot with arrogance. "Maybe you should go back to where you belong," he sneered, the words hitting harder than any punch could. Aaliyah's stomach twisted, a combination of fear and fury rising within her. She clenched her fists, wishing the world could see how wrong this felt, how unfair, how undeserved. Just when the situation teetered on the edge of chaos, a figure appeared at the corner. Lucas. His presence was like a shield, calm and unwavering, but the boys didn't back down. "Who's this? Your knight in shining armor?" Tyler mocked, stepping forward. Lucas didn't flinch. He held his ground, voice steady, eyes locked on the teenagers. The tension escalated. Words flew like sparks, insults ricocheting between the teens and Lucas. Aaliyah felt a strange mix of relief and awe. For the first time in hours, or maybe her whole life, someone stood in front of her, refusing to let the cruelty pass unchecked. The confrontation escalated faster than she could process. Tyler shoved Lucas, and for a heartbeat, Aaliyah feared the worst. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. Then, in a blur, Lucas pushed back with controlled force, stepping between her and the boys. The teens hesitated, thrown off by his confidence, but the threat lingered. Aaliyah's mind raced. Who was this man and why did he care? She felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected, a spark of hope amid the chaos. Yet even as the boys backed off slightly, their sneers promised that this wasn't over. The tension didn't lift. It hung in the air like a storm cloud, threatening to break at any moment. As they walked away, muttering threats under their breath, Aaliyah realized something profound. The world could be cruel, but it could also surprise her. And while tonight's terror hadn't fully ended, she had discovered something vital. Someone willing to stand up, even when the odds seemed impossible. But the question remained, would the threat return? Were the streets really safe again, or was this just the beginning of a dangerous, unpredictable ordeal that would push her to the edge? Aaliyah didn't know it yet, but the city had shifted beneath her feet. Her ordinary life, the routine she had trusted for so long, had cracked. The coming days would test her in ways she couldn't imagine, and force her to confront not just the cruelty of others, but the courage within herself. The night had grown darker, the city's familiar hum replaced by an almost suffocating silence. Aaliyah's footsteps echoed against the cold pavement as she hurried home, clutching her bag as if it could shield her from the world. But the shadows seemed alive tonight, watching, waiting. And then she saw them, Tyler, Cody, and Blake, lurking near the corner, faces twisted with malice. Her heart stopped. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she had nowhere to go. The streets were empty, every alley a potential trap. The boys closed in, and this time their cruelty was sharper, bolder. Tyler sneered. "Thought you could get away, huh?" Cody shoved her lightly, just enough to make her stumble, while Blake's laughter rang in her ears like a warning bell. Aaliyah's chest heaved. Anger, fear, and frustration collided inside her. She wanted to scream, to strike back, to make them feel even a fraction of the humiliation they were trying to inflict. But she was alone. At least that's what she thought. Then, a voice cut through the tension. calm but firm. "Back off!" Lucas stepped out of the shadows, his presence like a barrier of safety and fire at the same time. His eyes locked on the boys, unwavering, a silent promise that he wouldn't let anything happen to her. Tyler's smirk faltered, Cody hesitated, and even Blake took a cautious step back. But the boys weren't done. They lunged suddenly, aggressive, desperate to assert their power. Aaliyah felt panic spike. This was more than harassment now. It was dangerous. She braced herself, her mind spinning, when Lucas moved like a force of nature. With quick, precise movements, he blocked their attacks, grabbing Tyler's arm and holding him back, his calm authority radiating like an invisible shield. "Stay away from her," Lucas growled. Aaliyah watched in awe, heart pounding, not just from fear, but from something more complicated. There was a warmth in his eyes, a steadiness that contrasted sharply with the chaos around them. She realized, in that moment, that she had never felt safer or more seen than she did under his gaze. The struggle escalated. Tyler shoved Lucas, and for a heartbeat, Aaliyah thought the boys might overpower him. But Lucas stood firm, muscles tense, unwavering. And then, in a move that seemed to freeze time, he stepped closer to Aaliyah, instinctively shielding her with his body. Their eyes met, and in that silent moment, a spark passed between them. A connection forged in fear, courage, and undeniable chemistry. The boys faltered, uncertainty creeping into their bravado. "This isn't over," Cody muttered, but even as they backed away, the tension lingered like smoke. Aaliyah's knees felt weak, but a strange, thrilling surge of relief washed over her. They were gone, for now. She exhaled shakily, turning to Lucas. His hand brushed hers accidentally, but the contact was electric, sending warmth straight to her chest. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice low, protective. Aaliyah nodded, words failing her, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Lucas smiled, a mixture of relief and something softer, something that made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't expected. "You don't have to thank me," he said gently. "You shouldn't have to face this alone ever." The night seemed to hold its breath as they stood there, the city lights flickering over their faces. In the chaos, the fear, and the injustice, something beautiful had emerged, a connection that was unexpected, raw, and undeniably real. For the first time in a long while, Aaliyah felt a spark of hope, not just for her safety, but for something more. But the street was silent now, the danger momentarily gone, leaving her with a question that hovered between them, heavy and urgent. Was this the end of the threat? Or had tonight only revealed the beginning of a world she would have to fight to navigate, together? Her pulse slowed slightly, but the adrenaline lingered. Lucas's gaze held hers, steady and unyielding, and for the first time she realized she wasn't just thankful. She was drawn to him, to the courage, the strength, and the unexpected tenderness that had appeared in the midst of fear. And as the boys' threats echoed faintly in the distance, Aaliyah knew this night would change her forever, and that their story was only just beginning. The night had ended, but its echoes lingered in Aaliyah's mind. The streets that had once felt dangerous and unwelcoming now seemed charged with possibility, a reminder that fear could be faced, and courage could rise in the most unexpected places. Lucas stayed by her side as they walked slowly through the quiet avenues, each step deliberate, a shared moment of relief after the chaos. For Aaliyah, the events of that night were transformative. She realized that the world could be cruel, that some people carried ignorance and hate like a weapon, but she also learned that there were those willing to stand, unflinching, in the face of injustice. Lucas wasn't just a stranger who intervened. He became a symbol of hope, of protection, of something stronger than fear. In the following days, Aaliyah reflected on the incident again and again. The harassment, the sneers, the bullying. It could have left her broken, withdrawn, or fearful. But instead, she felt empowered. She shared her story with friends and co-workers. And while some reactions were sympathetic, others revealed the harsh reality. Racism and prejudice didn't just exist on the streets. They lurked in everyday interactions, in whispered judgments, and in the assumptions of strangers. Despite that, Aaliyah refused to let the actions of a few define her life. She began to reclaim her streets, walking with confidence, refusing to shrink in the face of potential harassment. And she was not alone. Lucas became a constant presence, supporting her not just physically, but emotionally. Their bond deepened with each shared conversation, each act of kindness, and each moment of quiet understanding. The trust that grew between them was born from crisis, but it blossomed into something tender, romantic, and enduring. It wasn't only personal courage that mattered. Aaliyah realized the importance of community. She connected with local groups advocating for safer streets, mentoring programs, and anti-bullying initiatives. Her story became a rallying point, a reminder that one person's voice could inspire change. And in standing up publicly, she found solidarity she hadn't imagined.
People who understood that silence in the face of injustice allowed hate to flourish. Meanwhile,
the boys, Tyler, Cody, and Blake, faced consequences that went beyond fear. Their reckless behavior was reported, and the school system intervened. They were required to attend counseling, perform community service, and publicly acknowledge the harm their actions had caused. Aaliyah didn't seek revenge, but justice followed. The world wasn't perfect, but the actions of a few didn't have to overshadow the courage of the many. As weeks turned into months, Aaliyah and Lucas's relationship grew into a profound partnership. It was not born of ease or convenience, but of shared experiences and the knowledge that when life demanded courage, they could rely on each other. Their love was a quiet rebellion against fear, a statement that humanity could rise above prejudice. Even the simple gestures, a hand held in a crowded street, a reassuring smile during tense moments, carried the weight of survival, protection, and trust. Aaliyah's journey also inspired introspection in her community. Friends and neighbors who had once ignored subtle injustices began to speak out. Local businesses organized awareness programs. Conversations about race, respect, and responsibility became more than polite nods. They became action. Aaliyah realized that the world changed not only when courage confronted hate directly, but also when ordinary people refused to remain silent. In the years that followed, Aaliyah continued to thrive. She advanced in her career, pursued education, and became an advocate for racial justice, mentoring younger women who faced harassment or discrimination. Lucas stood by her side, equally committed to fostering change and protecting those who needed a voice. Their love was no longer just a spark born in crisis. It was a steady flame, a reminder that beauty and trust could emerge from the darkest nights. The moral of Aaliyah's story became clear. Racism isolates, divides, and diminishes communities. Prejudice erodes trust, weakens relationships, and leaves fear in its wake. But courage, whether in the form of intervention, solidarity, or standing firm against injustice, heals, unites, and empowers. And sometimes, out of danger and chaos, unexpected connections are forged, proving that empathy and love can flourish even where hatred once threatened. Looking back, Aaliyah understood that her life would never be the same. She had been tested, pushed to the edge of fear, and yet she emerged not only unbroken but stronger. Lucas had been a catalyst, yes, but she had also discovered the strength within herself, the courage to reclaim her life, and the determination to shape her future. Together they represented a lesson for the world. Hate can be met with fear, or it can be met with courage, love, and resilience. On quiet nights, Aaliyah would sometimes walk the same streets where she had once felt vulnerable. But now she held her head high, hand in Lucas's, each step a quiet triumph. The memory of Tyler, Cody, and Blake's cruelty remained, but it no longer held power over her. It had become a lesson, a warning, and a reminder that the fight against injustice was ongoing, but worth every ounce of bravery. And so the story ended not with fear, but with hope. Not with isolation, but with connection. Not with hate, but with courage, love, and resilience. Because in a world where prejudice exists, those who stand together and refuse to be silenced can create change. And Aaliyah and Lucas had done exactly that. The streets that once seemed menacing now carried a quiet victory, a testament to the power of standing up, the strength of compassion, and the unshakable truth: courage defeats hate. Unity brings healing, and love can emerge even from the darkest nights.